Shalom, friends of Israel. I am Sal Isabram, National President of Jewish National Fund USA. Thank you for joining us on our daily briefings as we continue to stand in active solidarity with our family and friends in Israel. Before we move into our program, we must recognize that today we're commemorating Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, referring to the pogrom of November 9, 1938, when Nazi aggression escalated against Jews throughout Germany and Austria. 92 Jews were murdered, 267 synagogues were burned, 7,500 Jewish businesses were set on fire and decimated. 30,000 Jews were seized and sent to concentration camps. These days, we are reciting different numbers in the face of resurrected evil. October 7, 2023, 1,400 slaughtered, 241 kidnapped, over 3,000 injured, 34 IDF soldiers lost in the ground operation, thousands marching with hate on their tongues in London, New York, Austria, Los Angeles, Paris. It is day 34 of this war. We marked Shloshim a few days ago, the 30-day period following a Jewish burial. But we're still in mourning, unable to understand how something like this can happen to our nation, our people, again. I'd like to offer words from the late Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. Quote, Hitler in Mein Kampf had called a conscious Jewish invention. Throughout the Holocaust, the Nazis performed acts and intended to destroy Jewish faith. They chose Judaism's holiest day for their most savage acts. The Warsaw Ghetto was sealed on Yom Kippur 1940. It was scheduled for destruction in 1943 on the first day of Pesach, the Jewish Festival of Freedom. Prague was the one important center where synagogues were not destroyed. The reason was that Nazis intended, when all the Jews of Europe were murdered, to turn them into a museum of a dead civilization. So they still stand today. One of them, Altinul Shul, the new synagogue, is the oldest Jewish place of worship dating from the 13th century, end quote. 15 years ago, on the 70th anniversary of Kristallnacht, Rabbi Sacks gathered with 274 rabbis across Europe, and he described this gathering of hundreds in the tiny shul as a story of resurrection of Jewish life, brought back from death. He proclaimed in the wake of evil, a new generation was learning about their faith that the greatest tyranny tried to obliterate. Since that Black Saturday on Simchat Torah, our faith, our hope has been tested, but our people are stronger. We are resilient. We are not scattered, shattered nation without a home. We are the Jewish people with a homeland in Israel. And as Rabbi Sacks noted, some things survive even the worst tragedy, allowing us to rekindle the flame of faith. Together, all of us, with Jewish National Fund USA, are keeping the flame alive, and we will rebuild together. That has been our mission since the inception of our organization. It's why we were there yesterday, why we are here today, and staying true to our mission will ensure that we will be there tomorrow. Our first speaker today is Archie Gottesman, co-founder and CEO of JewBelong.org, a groundbreaking organization and web-based platform originally focused on rebranding Judaism to make it more warm, relevant, and welcoming for all, no matter where they are on the Jewish journey. Since May of 2021, JewBelong has been raising awareness about the evils of anti-Semitism through their billboard and digital campaigns. The awareness campaigns, which have been in over 27 states, are laser focused on getting out of the Jewish echo chamber and speaking plainly and in a memorable sound bites to the 98% of Americans who are not Jewish. Archie resides in New York City. Archie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I am really happy to be here, and I'd like to start with the slides, Gary, because I have a little bit of a personal story that I'm not here to show well, I am. This is my daughter, Lily, and her husband now, Stephen. About 2 weeks ago, they got married. And the reason that I want to show that to you is Lily went to high school in Israel. And whoops, that did 2 clicks. Hold on, let me go back. Lily and I have 3 daughters. They all went to high school in Israel when they were sophomores in high school, and it was HSI that changed all 3 of their lives and made Lily. She came home and she said, I'm going back to Israel to go in the IDF. And I said, sure, whatever. Anyway, and she did. So I just have, is a hill I will die on when I tell people, if there is one thing you can do for a child is get them to HSI. And I really thank all of you for that amazing program that changed the lives of my entire family. So I'm going to go into JewBelong. So I started JewBelong in, just going to the next slide, about 2016. Before JewBelong, I had been in my family's business and did the marketing at Manhattan Mini Storage. So for any New Yorkers, we were pretty iconically known for our billboards. I know my way around billboards. That's got a little bit of a one-trick pony, but I know how to message short, simple issues. And I always thought that Judaism needed a little bit of a rebrand. And I was very interested in trying to reach out to those who maybe felt like they never got the secret handshake of how to be, just felt outsiders when it came Jewish. So we did 2 campaigns like this. So you eat bacon, God has other things to worry about. We don't care which half of you is Jewish. Happy, going along, things were fine. Then what happened is May of 21, all of a sudden, anti-Semitism became normalized. Online, college campuses, you guys know. And it's very hard to sort of talk about the joys of Judaism with a target on your back. So we added anti-Semitism, this was in May of 21, to what we were caring about. And we went around the country, 22 states, cities, which with billboards like this. We're just 75 years since the gas chamber, so no, a billboard calling out Jew hate isn't an overreaction. I think there were many, but I'm just going to show you a couple. Can a billboard end anti-Semitism? No, but you're not a billboard. Does your church need armed guards? Because our synagogue does. And that was what we were doing, both the Joyous Judaism and these billboards like this, because people need to know about anti-Semitism. They know about every other issue in the world. They got to know about anti-Semitism. And then what happened is October 7th, and the entire game changed. The world changed, as you guys know. So we said, okay, so we need to be changing too. So, sorry, that was one more pre. That was Think Jew Hate Isn't Dangerous, Try Wearing a Yarmulke. That was pre-October 7th. And then we also had a truck that we were bringing to campuses, because that's where a lot of the issues are with the anti-Semitism. Then when the world changed, we are having messages like this. Cultural Jews died in the gas chamber too. Speak up. Let's be clear, Hamas is your problem too. And this is what we are landing on. How do I stop? I'm done with the slides, Gary. Thank you. So the reason that we are doing billboards, because it's very important. So in that last one that said, let's be clear, Hamas is your problem too. We don't have time in this world right now to play our B game, to play any of our B players. JewBelong tests messages all the time. We're putting a couple $1,000s a day towards testing messages to a non-Jewish audience on digital ads. So what we are finding is that as we want to be speaking to the non-Jews, okay, because that's the issue. And the world is such that people there are some people who really hate Jews. They're anti-Semites. I don't care about them. That's not who we want to talk to. There are people who love Jews, would never dream of being anti-Semitic. I don't want to talk to them either. I want to talk to the mushy middle. It's that mushy middle. It's really about, could be 80% of America. It's hard to know exactly, but it's close, who have not really taken much of an interest in it. They don't like Jews. They don't dislike Jews. But they are very, very important, because this is a messaging battle that we were in. The other side, the people who scream free Palestine, that's a message from a river to a sea. That is messaging. That is an area that the Jewish community JewBelong feels that we need to be stronger when we are keeping things simple and memorable. So, as I said, we do a lot, and that is the reason that we are interested in the "let's be clear, Hamas is your problem too," is that is what Americans are interested in. As I said, we do a lot of testing, and my heart breaks every day, as I'm sure yours does too, when I think about the hostages. And I know there's been a lot of hostage billboards all over the country, and unfortunately, about 6 days after the 7th, 7 days, the sympathy for the hostages and what was happening started to really go down. And people, the messages that our enemies are doing are saying, well, why is a Jewish hostage any more important than the Palestinian baby that you just killed? So that message, which resonates so in each one of our hearts, doesn't really resonate as well to sort of the broad public. Again, that's what I'm interested in. Broad public. What do they care about? You know what they care about? They care about themselves. And they care about that Hamas is fighting a holy war, and they care about someday it's going to come to America. That is what they care. They don't particularly care about Jews, but they do care that this problem could be on in their lives. Okay, so that is why Hamas is your problem too, is very, it's just the strongest message right now. We will keep testing every single day, so it's possible it'll change, but that's really what needs to happen for so many, for that mushy middle is. This is not my problem. This is my problem today. It's your problem tomorrow. You better hope that Israel beats Hamas. You better stop calling for a ceasefire. All that nonsense that's happening, that is going to hurt them. People are very, people are selfish. They're worried about their lives. Why do billboards work? Is we live in very siloed lives. You see your news feed, I see my feed. My algorithm on my Instagram account is different than yours. So we've all sort of, it's just the way the world, every channel and newspaper that we pick up, we have picked up our own, and we get different news than everybody else. And when you really think about it, outdoor advertising, which are basically billboards and bus stops and things like that, is really the only unsiloed way to reach people in the world that we live in, because everyone drives on Route 80 or walks down the street and might see the billboard. JewBelong believes very strongly in, you have to see a message at least 3 times before it gets into your brain. So we're doing a lot of repetition. Our goal, and another thing about billboards, is they get on the news. And remember, I'm interested in the mainstream, not particularly the Jewish audience. So we're getting on CNN and ABC and CBS. So the mainstream that everybody is reading, they will see the billboards, and they'll say, okay, can you come on TV and talk about why did you put these billboards in San Antonio, Texas? And you know my answer. It's exactly what I just told you. It's because people in San Antonio who are not Jewish should be worried about Hamas ruining their lives. And that is what this message is. And I also, let's see what else. JewBelong is a 501c3. I'm very proud to be a philanthropist in my own right. So I pay for all of the overhead at JewBelong. So when people are interested in billboards, the money goes right to the billboards or the testing. And I do just want to talk, just another minute or two. By the way, I'm just so happy to be here talking to all of you today. I really, really am. When I talked about the testing, it's incredibly important to always be to be simple with messaging to, again, to that mushy middle who don't care that much. So JewBelong, I believe very, very strongly in social media too. That is where we sort of lost a lot of this war. And where we are, gaining back, but being very, very bold and knowing that following the data is important. It's not, trust me, we put messages on every day on our Instagram. Some of them I love. I would want them, on billboards across the country. They never get anywhere because we see what do people like and what is that non-Jewish audience interested in. And yeah, my dream, and I'm going to make it a reality because it's that important to our survival, is to go to be in all 50 states and with this campaign, and then to do it again. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. This is keeping anti-Semitism on everyone's voice. America talks about things all the time. They talk about Black Lives Matter. They talk about transgender rights. They talk about gay marriage. They talk about gun rights. They should be talking about anti-Semitism as much as any other issue out there. It's more important than than other issues, and that is what it's like getting into their brains by what we're doing, and that's what we're up to.
So first, Archie, Mazel Tov on your daughter's wedding.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much.
And some questions have come in, but you've already answered them during your interview here. But I guess one thing that I'd like to ask is, we have a fabulous marketing department, and we have terrific volunteers like Vivian Grossman and others that work with us. Is there anything that you would suggest that we put into our messaging as individuals, not necessarily as the JNF, but as individuals, that we should put in our postings?
I know your postings. I follow you guys. I see, it has a lot to do with who you're talking to. It really, really does. It's like, we all have target audiences. If you're talking I do have an answer. You are talking mostly to your audience, and that is your audience. So you don't necessarily, it's an educated group and they have certain issues. I always think it's helpful when groups say, this is what we're talking about, but by the way, those mushy middle people who because we all know them, the people who haven't, they couldn't find Israel on a map and pretty much they don't care, which is fine. Give me something as your audience to tell them. It's like learning what to do. I will tell people sometimes to go read a book or read a long article, because JewBelong believes that, sure, I'm not writing articles, I'm not writing books, but I know who's writing good books and good articles. So it's almost like you can be a disperser of other things. So for this simple message, I think that could be very helpful. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you so much, Archie. We wish you success in all that you do. We will look out for the bright pink billboards and social media posts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Virag, Gulyas, a former diplomat to the EU, communications consultant, journalist, and conscious activist who earned her second master's degree in Jewish studies. As a woman who admits growing up around anti-Semite jokes and vibes, she today writes and speaks about her journey and is well known for her raw, honest blog, The Almost Jewish, both in the US, Europe, and Israel. As a loud, pro-Jewish voice, a Hungarian and a non-Jewish Zionist, she has created an ideology to change the stereotypes about Israel and the Jewish people, the one day at a time. Virag is also a member of our JNF Global Speakers Bureau and is working to help place our diverse speakers with communities for events around the country. It happens that Virag is based in Denver, Colorado, and of course, will be joining us at our global conference for Israel, which you can register at jnf.org/global. Virag, thank you for being with us today and providing your update.
Thank you so much for having me, and welcome everyone. First of all, my heart goes out to everyone who was directly impacted on what happened on October 7th. I can't even fathom, what people are going through whose loved ones are still among the hostages. So really, you are not alone. And Archie, it's been a pleasure listening to you. I've known you very well because I spent 7 years in New York City, so I saw your billboards all over. And I'm probably one of your target audience in that sense, being a non-Jewish person. So when I was asked to, come on this call, I was thinking, what is the added value that I can provide today? Because there is a story that I tell in peace times. I grew up in anti-Semitic jokes around anti-Semitic remarks and stereotypes. And today, all I'm doing is working with Jewish nonprofits, and I'm speaking about the experience of how one can change his or her own, beliefs. And then when I was putting my thoughts together for today, I realized that I don't even need my personal journey to make sense of what happened on October 7th. I do not need this whole reformation from anti-Semitism to Jewish civil rights to understand that October 7th was a terrorist attack. And what people are failing to understand is that you really don't need to contextualize what happened. It's not a question of political ideologies and Israel versus Palestinian people. No, it is simply the question, which side are you picking for the future, the good or the evil? It was a terrorist attack by a terrorist organization. And I myself survived 2 terrorist attacks in Europe. So it really hits close when people, especially here in America, still call these people freedom fighters. These are not freedom fighters, they are terrorists. So you really don't need a PhD in understanding what happened there. And it is not solely a Jewish issue. It is not even an Israeli issue per se, because we know from the past that what starts with the Jews never stops with the Jews. This is a human rights issue and a common sense issue. And this is why I often say, I call myself rather a common sense activist as opposed to a pro-Israel activist, because the whole notion that you need to be pro-Israel is already putting Israel on a whole different standards than other countries. There is so much hatred towards my country, Hungary, and yet I don't need to call myself a pro-Hungarian. I feel like that in and of itself is a mistake. I'm not pro-Israel and anti-this. No, I'm for common sense. And yes, that also entails that I do believe that Israel has the legitimacy to exist and Jewish lives matter. And when Archie was speaking, I was thinking, the bottom line of the issue here, what we see around us, is the dehumanization of Jews. And that is the core problem that we need to rebuild here. For some reason, every other minority group is able to do that. But when it comes to the Jews, it's business as usual. And we are totally okay with 40 plus kids being kidnapped, held hostage by a terrorist organization. And yet people have the heart to tear down those posters under the pretense of human rights activism. And that is, I think, really, really worrisome. We see that all over the US, Western Europe, mainstream media, but above all on social media, that the attempt here is really to make the terrorists the victims. There is this perverted ideology out there that somehow the victims, the real victims, become the scapegoat. And people today, especially, the generation who grew up on social media, they earn their education by 3 seconds of headlines. And this is how we end up having arguments on how actually Gaza has been occupied by Israel, which we know it's not true. Or the biggest misconception is that there ever was a Palestinian sovereign state, then the European Jews went there and colonized it. So like the historical mishmashes here are so wild that the gap between the people on social media and the reality is actually tragic. And I'm a huge advocate of having the really uncomfortable talks, primarily because I went through my own journey. I needed to ask myself the hard questions, why do I have the stereotypical views against the Jews? Who told me that? How did I grow up? Why do I even see that? And then, have I ever met a Jew? So all these questions I started to write about like 8 years ago. So my transformation also didn't happen overnight. I dated an Israeli and I was even calling my mom like, oh my God, he's a Jewish person. This was my starting point, but I don't know why. But what I always say when I invited to speak is, I was ignorant. I didn't know any better. I grew up without social media. All I had, was what I saw about the Jewish communities in my proxy, which was in Budapest. If you have ever been, my classical ballet school was beside the synagogue. So all I saw was the Orthodox Jews. That's all my knowledge, ended. But what we see today, especially in America and in Western Europe, is a very different kind of antisemitism. It's an ideologically driven, purposefully hatred-driven one. It's not even the lack of knowledge anymore. It is somehow, it's okay to dehumanize Jews. And I'm thinking a lot about it, how psychologically it could happen that after what went down on October 7th, people were so easy and so quick in mobilizing for Gaza and the de facto terrorist organization, instead of mobilizing for Israel, which is the only democratic state in the Middle East, and who was targeted by terrorism. I'm trying to think how psychologically it is okay to side with a terrorist organization. And as an activist, I have been in this niche for 10 years. So whoever was around, we know that it didn't happen overnight, what we are seeing now. It was years in the making. Zionist and Jewish and Israeli kids have been targeted on college campuses for years. So it is not something of a novelty. But what we are seeing now is that normalization that and also Archie mentioned before, that we've seen for years, today, it is the full-blown manifestation of that tendency to normalize Jew hatred. And I remember while I was doing my master's degrees, I earned it in Jewish studies in Manhattan at Touro College. All my classmates were Jewish. I think I was the first non-Jew ever doing this program. And my classmates were joking about how they all have one non-Jewish person in their neighborhood who could hide their family should another Holocaust happen. And I found that joke so morbid. And I was like, no, come on, that cannot, no. I mean, how? And that is when I started to understand the collective trauma of the Jewish community. And of course, every society has their, collective traumas. I have my own because of the Soviet Union. My grandfather was taken to the Gulag and so on. But there was the point when I started to understand what it might have meant to be a Jew. That even though the Holocaust is the past, there is always a fear of the future, what can happen. And when people, like wondering how the Holocaust could have happened, I always say that today, this new generation is not even able to offer their seat on the metro to a woman who is, pregnant, or to an older person. But we expect people to kind of save Jews when your life is at stake. So everyone was blaming, in the past, how there was no more people helping. Today, we see the same thing. How could the Holocaust happen? We see it today. It could happen by attesting to hate mongering against Jews. It could happen by remaining bystanders. And it could happen by joining the so-called cool kids cult. That is just, just to feel to belong. And that is what we see on the other side now. Everyone pretends to be the cool kids marching with a Palestinian flag and, chanting the motto of a terrorist organization, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, without even knowing where Gaza is. And yeah, so I still have faith, but I don't think that the task at hand is an easy one. But such as on an individual level, every day we are making choices between good and evil. That is the same on society level, And it's always easier to choose the bad one because that's easier. It's easier to go towards eating another chips instead of choosing the salad. It's the same thing on a moral level. Obviously, lives are at stake, so it's way more significant. Really, it's heartbreaking for me to see how the Jewish communities are feeling alone. And just this month on social media, it was mentioned, I run under the name Almost Jewish, which was a gimmicky name because I always thought I should have been a Jew. But then I did a DNA test and there is not even 1% in me in Eastern Europe. So that's kind of ridiculous, but there it is. And so I always choose, to talk about things that perhaps bring added value. So I don't want to be another quote unquote pro-Israel advocate because it's not my role. My role is to be me, the non-Jewish person who went through her own experiences. And this month I'm reaching 1 million people. And I get, all the hatred, all the death threats, all that thing. But it's also interesting because Archie said, we all have like a target audience. And for her, clearly, it's non-Jewish people. For me, my followers are really like a mixed bunch. And interestingly enough, I'm having debates with Jewish people who are siding with, Jewish Voice for Palestine and things. And then there I am, the non-Jew, trying to tell them that basically the people you are protecting now would kill you in a heartbeat. So that's like a really twisted situation as well. So since I moved from New York, my activism shifted a lot. In New York, I was doing rallies and I worked at the UN, and then I came out of the UN and made a rally against the UN. So that was my life in New York. Then I moved to the mountains to, have less of an impulse to do these things all the time. But it doesn't stop because I live in Boulder. And all I saw was the other night that the whole city was splattered with the Free Palestine posters sticked over the kidnapped people's faces. So what could I do? Just tore down all the Free Palestine ones because, you are not hiding kids' faces who are held hostage by Hamas. So this is my story. But as I said, my story is not even important here because nobody really needs to understand the historical details to understand and really condemn what happened on October 7th. It was a terrorist attack, and we need to really highlight that Jewish lives matter, and we need to rehumanize Jews. And with this one, I'm going to circle to something that happened recently when the CEO of JNF USA, Russell Robinson, asked me whether I would like to head the Speakers Bureau at JNF. And I was like, yes, let's do that. But then I didn't really know that this job is actually going to be so much more important than I anticipated. Because today, my role is really to find speakers who either went through, terrorist attack themselves by Hamas or other jihadist groups, or change their lives by going to Israel, or to really rehumanize Jews, as I keep on mentioning. I think it's a very important concept. And so today I'm heading the JNF Speakers Bureau, and I'm really trying to, offer a wide variety of speakers from various minority groups and beyond. And as a speaker, my motto is that if you can change what people are paying attention to, you can change who they are in the moment. And I think this is really beautiful because what we need to do today is to change people's attention and shift it away from cheering for a terrorist organization to actually see the bigger picture. And I'm not sure that, especially here in America, people really understand what it can mean that Hamas is already around us. I think in Eastern Europe, we are more understanding of the current situation and what is going on, and Germany is waking up and France is waking up. Here in the US, there is this new generation who grew up with such a good life that they don't really know, what they can lose. And I think perhaps this emptiness, this void is what they fill up by joining the alleged underdog. They just don't really understand what's at stake. So this is where I'm going to stop, and thank you for everyone who joined us today, and thank you for having me. It's been really an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
So thank you, Virag, and we look forward to seeing you at our global conference. Finally, we will close our week with Dina Schiff, JNF USA's Chief of Staff. Dina spent the last 4 days in Israel as she's overseeing the JNF USA Travel and Tours Department as they finalize our volunteer missions to Israel. These working missions will begin December 10th. You can register at jnf.org/volunteeRIL. Dina, thank you for all you're doing. Please share with us about your recent trip.
Thank you, Saul. So as you said, I was just in Israel for 4 days. I just got back this morning, and I have to say I am forever changed. Israel is forever changed. Everyone is dealing with a new normal. They're operating under, the only thing I can say is a suspended reality. But I want to be clear, I felt safe. For the non-evacuated or whoever is not on reserve duty, they're going to work. The children are going to school. There were daily red alerts and sirens, and you go in and out of the shelters. But again, even when I was in the shelter, I felt safe. And the Israelis I spoke to in the shelter, they told me they've sort of become apathetic towards the sirens. It's become their new normal. However, for the 100,000 civilians who have been evacuated from their home, their new normal is not something that we can even understand. I had the opportunity to meet with members of the Shlomit community and talk to two widows who lost their husbands because they got a call from a neighboring community and they ran in to help. And by doing so, they paid the ultimate sacrifice by losing their life. But they saved every member of the kibbutz that they ran in to save. These men served on the Eshkol Council. They were builders and farmers and fathers and friends. But yet the widows told me that they cannot wait to go back to their home, to the houses that their husbands built with their bare hands. I also had the opportunity to go to the Dead Sea, where 11,000 evacuees are living in hotels. There we met with people from Sderot and Eshkol, the communities that were evacuated as a unit, like Sderot. There are 6,000 of the 11 are from Sderot, and they're keeping together, they're supporting each other, their needs are being met, but yet there are many other communities that are there and they're spread out all over the place and they're struggling. It's a little harder. They don't have that unified voice, but they're creative. The spa has become a kindergarten. They're creating, the mall has become a school. So they're making it work, but it's not sustainable. Like, imagine living in a hotel for 33 days with 4 people in a room and maybe your dog, and you don't have laundry, you don't have your own kitchen, you barely have the items that you need, and it's just, it can't go on. So for many people also, this week for the evacuees was the first week that they're going back to school. And as I said, some are in tents, some are being absorbed in the cities that they've been evacuated to, and the anxiety is high because this is the first time the parents and the children have been separated from each other. But then think of the kids that are going into the class and they're looking around at the people who are not there because they were either killed or they're kidnapped. So the psychological needs are vast and going to last for a long, long time. So I saw this and a lot more, but I want to talk about 3 takeaways that I got from the trip. The first that was kind of shocking to me is that everyone I spoke to who had each experienced trauma was worried about us in the diaspora. They kept asking, what's happening in New York? What's happening on the college campuses? What's going on? I can't believe what's happening. And then in conversations together, we kind of all agreed that it's actually safer in Israel than it is there because they know who their enemy is. Here, their enemy looks like me. So, that was a little shocking. And the second was that also impacted me was the consistent message that I heard from the affiliates, from our JNF affiliates, that we are the only ones with boots on the ground. That when we asked them, what do you need? And we sent the money immediately. And then they know also that not only are we with them before, that they know we're with them today, but they know that in the future, we will be with them as well. And just to give you an example, I don't know if you've been on this call before, I met with the same woman that Jeff and Tali met when they went that first week. And she was a woman who was evacuated from one of the communities in Eshkol. She was one of 6 who survived, was in a shelter that a grenade was thrown and 30 people were killed. And she was one of 6 who survived. And she told me that if it wasn't for the psychological services that she got in Ramat HaNegev on day 1, she doesn't know how she would have survived, because they asked for it that day and we said, here, you take what you need. And just also to note, just to give you perspective, because it was mind-blowing to me, this kibbutz Mashavei Tzadeh that they are living in now was a kibbutz of 600 people. They absorbed 800 new people, over doubling the amount of people who were living in this community. And my last point that I realized is that There is so much work that we can be done. We have spoken on these calls about food insecurities between the Thai workers that fled and the Palestinian workers that cannot come back into Israel and the hundreds of thousands of people who are serving in the IDF and the reserves. Their farms are in critical condition, but we can help and we are going to help. As Saul said, starting December 10th, we are sending weekly volunteer missions to Israel. There'll be 4 days, 4 nights, working in farms, visiting in hospitals, working on an IDF base, going to visit the people at Adi Negev. We will do whatever is needed to be done, but these are working trips. This is not a solidarity mission. This is not a mission to make you feel good. If you are ready to work and work hard, then this trip is for you. I want to be clear. This is not a solidarity mission. You've got to be ready to work hours a day in the field, in the hot sun. And if you want to do that, come with us, because we're going to have this. It's going to make a huge impact, not only on the people, but I'm telling you, you will also be forever changed when you come back. Thank you.
Wow, Dina, it's clear that your adrenaline is flowing because you just landed and you were able to give that presentation. And it is a different perspective than we've heard from anyone else. So thank you so much for going over, representing us. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of volunteers to be part of the program. Tomorrow, as we did last Friday, we will strike a different tone and bring you our program, Prayers for Israel, a time for reflection. This program, developed by our JNF Future Young Philanthropists and our education department, will bring representatives from so many of our communities: Caravan for Democracy alumni, JNF USA rabbis from Israel, from Phoenix, Arizona, Hollywood, Florida, a pastor from Atlanta, Georgia, and more. Next week, we will welcome former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, Lucy Harish, and other important and informed speakers. On Tuesday, March 14th, we will broadcast live from the March for Israel rally on the Mall in Washington, D.C., as Jewish National Fund USA is joining the thousands upon thousands marching to show our support for Israel, for freeing the hostages, and to combat anti-Semitism. We remind you that your support to our resilience campaign is critical, and you can contribute at jnf.org/support Israel. For now, I'll sign off until tomorrow's prayer program at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you for joining. I'm Israel Chai. We stand with Israel.